Okay, Steven, so you've picked yourself up, combine all the tools, all the know-how that we already given in the previous episodes, but can you share with us your story, how you came about this concept? You've already shared a lot about your intellectual heroes, but more so the personal story, how it all linked up and got to the point where it is today.
I kind of, embarked on a journey of reinvention very early on in my life. I come from a working class family in the northwest of England that, I was born in 1962, so grew up in the 1970s, the UK, a lot of economic strife, 3-day week, political problems. Wasn't a particularly great environment to be a young person in, anticipating your future. So when I was 17, I decided that I didn't want to really spend more time in England than I needed to. I was sensing that there was more to life than what working class Northern England had to offer. So I put a backpack on and I resigned from my job. I took voluntary redundancy in actual fact and took the £250 sterling back in 1980, which was, I think, 3 months' salary. And decided I was going to take the magic bus from London to Greece, which I did. With a couple of other guys as it happened, and then spent a bit of time in Greece, not really knowing much about life, and then flew to Israel and went and spent what turned out to be over 3 trips, 2 years on a kibbutz. And on the kibbutz I learned some skills that were going to help me later on in life, such as agricultural skills, driving tractors, operating farm equipment and machinery, what have you. I also learned the importance of collaboration, because on the kibbutz, certainly the experiment at that time was all about collaborating. It was about a shared socialist end, which works in a very small community like a kibbutz. So that was really fascinating for me to understand, and I learned a lot about the world that way as well, because on the kibbutz there's a lot of volunteers from all different countries, and I met a lot of people, and it was a great melting pot to sort of plan where next to go in the world and what other things I wanted to do. So it gave me a natural sort of chain of connections in different places to go and sort of pop in and visit and what have you. And I met people who are now lifelong friends that I travelled with. So spending time on the kibbutz sort of opened my eyes. It left behind sort of the early formative years of experience of working class England, and I realised there's a little bit more to life than that. It gave me confidence to go and sort of travel and work in other places, which I did. I was in Israel. I worked on a farm in Western Australia, where today I live full-time. My home is, I'm an Australian citizen, but back then I was just a backpacker. And I worked on a wheat and sheep farm. And I was 21 that time. And I had learned a lot in that time, because I spent what was kind of 4.5 months sitting in a tractor with no CB radio to speak to anybody else, where the nearest town to me had 2,000 people, and that town was the only radio station that I could pick up. And when you find yourself in that kind of environment and you're doing something like ploughing a field, where you have to use hand-eye coordination to sort of follow the line of what you've previously ploughed and make sure you do it in a systemic fashion, you get into this groove where hour after hour goes by where you're just sort of looking like this and operating like this, and you become an autopilot, because the human sensory perceptions in there are honed on just a few little inputs, and then the rest of the time, when you're managing those 3 or 4 little inputs, you've got time to think, right? So I spent 4.5 months thinking about what I've been doing in my life, and what I'd really been doing until then, I realised, was setting goals for myself and achieving them. So when I looked at the prism of my life in that way, I thought, well, next move has got to be something bigger and more profound than what I'm doing, because I can't travel forever. That then led me to the decision to ultimately become a scholar and then go on to become a lawyer. So learning law as I did after I'd moved to Hong Kong, and then anticipating that my future career was going to be built around the idea I was going to be a solicitor. What I didn't understand at that point in time, that really what I was getting out of my law school education was this ability to find stuff and this ability to think in a certain way. So these kind of experiences have all built on sort of who I am, or who I was, to the point where I then sort of went into business for myself. And the first lesson that I had when I went into business for myself, I didn't know anything about business. I really didn't know anything about business. And I had decent sort of a mentorship network around me, but I still had to fathom it for myself. Then I read the book Focus by L. Rees. That taught me that I needed to focus on one thing. And then I had this experience with this lady who told me that I should write a book on immigration, which I did. Published it. She went bankrupt, and that coincided with the internet, and then me publishing the book on the internet between 1996 and 2000, and me losing everything. So, this is a very long answer to what was a pretty short question, but ultimately what's happened is that I've gained all of these life experiences, culminating in me doing really well between 96 and 2000, thinking I was Superman, and then spending the next 10 years making stupid decisions and losing it all. In the meantime, compromising my family life, compromising everything that my children had expected out of family life. I mean, they didn't suffer, thankfully, but it was a threat for a while, and I carried the prospect of that threat within me emotionally for a very long time. So all of this coloured who I was by the time I'd made the decision that I'd got to stop relying on other people. I needed to pick myself. So that was then a case of, well, okay, what does the future look like now, knowing that I can't carry on doing what I've done in the way that I've done it, because it'll be the end of me. So, if anything, what I want to try and share with people is the benefit of all of that experience and all of those inputs that led to me being, the person that I am today. And I think the other sort of dynamic to that is that by the time 2010 comes along and I'm looking down the barrel of a gun and I know I've got to sort it all out, I've got to do something about it properly, is this appreciation that in order for me to deliver on that, I had Martin in my life, which delivered on the technical side of what I was proposing with the business model I was putting together. But he was a man that had been through it all with me, right, and knew my journey and had experienced the latter part of my journey, and to his cost as well, because he'd stuck with me throughout all of this time, because he'd been involved in all my other projects. When it sort of came down to the crunch, it was thereafter. So ultimately what it boiled down to was relying on what I learned at law school, knowing how to find stuff, and once you find it, how to think about it. And that was really my saving grace, because I then had the toolkit to fathom out what this future thing was going to look like, and get to the point where I am in a position to be able to share that with everybody today. So my story ultimately encompasses all of those lessons and all of those experiences. But by the time I was ready to really learn from all of that, it's where I needed to make it work, because otherwise it was going to be a disaster for me. So what we've achieved is, as a result of a collection of experiences and circumstances in my life, in Martin's life, me having gained significant expertise in my niche in all of that time, knowing how not to do it, and knowing that the internet gave me all the resources that I needed to fathom to know how to do it properly. The next time around, and intelligent content marketing is me sharing all of those things that I've learned in the last few years. But the experiences of all the years before that have clearly coloured how I've interpreted what I've learned and what I should be doing to make sure that the trials and tribulations that I faced when I was losing it all, I won't ever face again. So it made me be very smart about the proposition that I constructed and I put together. And I've created a business that no one can take away from me, because I experienced what it's like when somebody took a business away from me because of my own stupidity.